Hi, team. I just started streaming to YouTube and we'll just wait for the others to join.
Thank you. Are you going to kick us off, Christina?
Sorry, I was on mute. Did you say anything? Did you need it?
I was just wondering if you're kicking us off.
If I want?
If you're kicking us off.
Oh, Francois as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Good
Hello.
afternoon.
I'm putting the link into Board Docs now, and we still have a couple minutes before 5 p.m. So
Thanks, Christina.
we have at least 3 board members on the call, and we do have the staff here. If Ms. Ledger, whenever you want to begin, you let me know.
Okay, sounds good. We can start now.
Yes, streaming.
Are we ready? Okay,
Yes.
great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francois Darrell Ledger, and I'm the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee for the Hartford Board of Education. And today is June 4th, 2025, and we are starting our meeting. And I always like to popcorn the meeting to different individuals who are on so that we can know who's on the call and their role. So I will now popcorn it off to Jennifer Hoffman.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Jen Hoffman, Assistant Superintendent for Special Education and Pupil Services. I will popcorn to Daisy Torres Hill.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Daisy Torres Hill, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and I will popcorn it over to Crystal Vancour.
Hi, I'm Crystal Vancour, and I'm representing teachers. I'm an ML teacher at Burr Middle School, as well as a parent representative, and I will pass it over to Steve Tatum.
Hi, everyone. I'm having some technical difficulties, but I'll be back on my computer in a minute. My name is Stephen Tatum, board member. Thanks for being here. I'll pass it over to Jen Huckenall.
Good evening, everyone. Jen Hockenhall, board member for the Board of Ed. I will pass it to Dr. Ratley.
Good evening, Connie Ratley. I am the Deputy Superintendent for Schools and Academics. And has Tracy Avicoli already gone?
Nope, not yet. Hi, Dr. Ratley. Hi, everybody. Tracy Avicoli. I'm the Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning. I will send it over to Brooke Lafreniere.
Good evening, everyone. Brooke Lafreniere. I'm one of the assistant principals at Buckley High School and here as an administrative representative for the grading policy work. I will popcorn to Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stephen Wilson, board member. Is there anybody else, or am I the last one? Christina, how about you?
I thought I was going to get away with the TNO committee. Christina Santiago, board liaison. And I think I'm the last.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And Christina, can we please have the agenda?
Yes. Give me a second. There we go.
Great. Thank you so much. And our first agenda item is recommendations for equitable grading practices. And I will send that over to, not send that over, but I will pass that on to the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Daisy Torres Hill.
Thank you so much, Board Member Darrell Ledger. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a moment. Okay, Brooke, I see you on my screen. If you can see the PowerPoint, thumbs up. Thank you so much. I want to just welcome everyone. Thank you for having us. I am very excited to share another update on our grading committee work. I do want to take a moment to thank our grading steering committee for their time, dedication, and commitment over the past several months. You heard earlier during introductions that 3 of our members are on the call today. So I would like to publicly thank Director of Secondary Tracy Avicoli, parent and teacher in our district, Crystal Van Coor, and Assistant Principal at Buckley High School, Brooke Lafreniere. Thank you so much for all that you have done to support our work, and that will be presented this evening. So thank you. Let me get us started. Our session objectives today is to provide an overview of our committee work to date and share district recommendations. This initiative directly supports equitable access to high-quality learning experiences and student connectedness to school. The Grading Steering Committee was established to review our current grading practices and ensure a fair and consistent grading system for all students. We launched with 4 key goals in mind: develop consistent grading practices, align with research on equitable grading, seek input and feedback, and inform any needed policy changes. This committee came together to examine our current grading practices and address the grading inconsistencies across schools in our district. Feedback from educators, families, and students highlighted the need for greater consistency. Survey and data on grading identified key issues that emerged as focus areas: inconsistent practices between schools, disconnect between grades and assessment outcomes, and varied understanding on the purpose of grading. Grading work has evolved over the years in our district through our work with CT Rise and through other district initiatives. Our goal here was to have consistent grading practices across all schools and ensure that we present a revision to a grading policy if necessary. The work over the past several months was intentionally cross-functional and inclusive of students, teachers, families, union leadership, support staff, and district and school years. Additionally, we partnered with PEL, or Partners for Educational Leadership, to guide our facilitation and ensure recommendations were grounded in research and best practice. We understand that meaningful implementation doesn't happen in a single year. These recommendations present a longer-term vision that will be introduced through a phased-in approach. We will outline the proposed implementation timeline and next steps at the end of our presentation. Here you will see some of the topics that we engage in during our sessions. This slide illustrates just how varied a student's experience with grading can be, even within the same school. A student, for example, might get penalized for late work in Teacher 1's class, can be graded on a curve in Teacher 2's class, and Teacher 3 may not allow redos. This can be challenging for a student to understand. One teacher might count participation and effort as 15% of the grade, while another doesn't count it at all. It was important for us to hear directly from our students. Their feedback was honest and reflective. Here you can see that one student sees grades as a game of memorization, not meaningful learning. Another believes their grades don't reflect what they're truly capable of. And this was really important to really ground our work in the student voice. We surveyed a small sampling of students, families, administrators, and teachers to ground our work in data. This graph shows the range of responses when asked about the primary purpose of grading. Most respondents felt the primary purpose is about providing students and families information about their progress towards learning, while only a few believe grades motivate students to learn. As educational research Tom Guskey notes, successful grading reform must begin with consensus on the purpose of grades. If educators aren't aligned on what grades are meant to convey, then inconsistencies will persist. We started here, building a shared understanding that grades should represent academic achievement aligned to standards. Here is the outcome of our committee's work. Hartford Public School believes students' growth is fostered through grading that is accurate, free from bias, and motivating. We use two distinct types of reporting to give a complete picture of a student progress: one grade on academic achievement and a separate score on habits of work. This purpose is grounded in a belief of shared ownership among teachers, students, and families in support of student success. Our work is also grounded in the 3 pillars of grading, as highlighted by Grading for Equity leader Joe Feldman. First pillar, accuracy, describes how grades must provide a clear, fair, and meaningful representation of what students know and can do, free of misleading factors like behavior or other non-academic criteria. Our second pillar, bias resistant, emphasizes how grading practices should be designed to minimize implicit bias and subjective judgment, ensuring fairness for students. For example, a teacher might unintentionally have lower expectations for a student based on their behavior. This can influence how an assignment is scored. Grading may be based on how compliant a student is in class or how their work compares to others, rather than the grade level standard. The third pillar, motivational, engages students in their learning, fostering motivation and a growth mindset. The committee identified 4 core grading principles that will guide our efforts to ensure that grading is accurate, fair, and supportive of student learning. These are assessments, habits of work, redos, retakes, time extension, and academic weights. In review of our grades and assessment outcomes across schools, we learned that there were variances in the grades students received and outcomes on assessments. The first principle, assessments, highlights the belief that grades reflect academic achievement, while habits of work such as engagement, preparation, interaction with learning are reported separately and are not factored into a student's final grade. Summative assessments such as a test measures a student's mastery of grade level standards. A formative assessment, such as an assignment, allows a teacher to track students' progress. This allows students to take risks and make mistakes during the learning process. By separating work habits from academic grades, teachers can more accurately assess what a student has actually learned. Habits of work are skills like engagement, preparation, and collaboration, and these are essentials to student success. To ensure grades reflect true academic mastery, these skills are taught supported through feedback, and reported separately from academic achievement. You can see an example of habits of work scoring rubric that outlines criteria for student behaviors such as preparation for class. These behaviors are assessed and reported on the report card separate from academic grades. Learning is a process. In order for students to grow, they need opportunities to practice, make mistakes, and receive meaningful feedback without early missteps permanently impacting their grade. This promotes a growth mindset and encourages students to stay engaged with their learning. Guidance ensures that students are provided with opportunities to revise work, redo assignments, and retake assessments within established guidelines to demonstrate improved understanding. For example, after feedback, in a writing assignment, a student might rewrite a portion of the essay, then submit a new draft for reassessment. This practice reinforces that learning is continuous and that effort and reflection matter. The goal for every student is to demonstrate mastery of the content. Academic grades should reflect what students have learned, not when they learned it. Guidance allows late work to be accepted and not graded as a 0. Within established timelines, students receive feedback and are supported in completing the work to demonstrate their learning. For example, a teacher may allow a student an additional 3 days to finish an essay after the student allows a clear path for improvement based on prior feedback. This approach keeps the focus on learning while still holding students accountable for engaging in the process. And finally, in a traditional 100-point grading system, a single 0 can disproportionately lower a student's overall grade, even when the student eventually demonstrates mastery of the content. Academic codes such as in progress and no evidence of learning are more effective tools for communication and intervention. These codes indicate a student's current status without penalizing them prematurely. They help maintain an accurate picture of where a student is in their learning journey. Through regular monitoring reports, academic codes provide timely insight into student progress, allowing educators and support teams to identify students who may need additional assistance or a targeted intervention plan before the end of the grading period. Academic codes keep the focus on growth and re-engagement. To maintain accountability, students are required to resolve these codes within a designated timeline. Teachers then update the student's grade in PowerSchool accordingly to reflect the most current demonstration of learning. Academic codes do not carry over from year to year. It's a way to allow students additional time to demonstrate their learning. We know change takes time, and to ensure success, we are intentionally thinking about starting small. Many of our elementary schools have already adopted standards-based grading and have been engaged in these grading practices for years. Their experience provides valuable insights that can inform our broader district-wide efforts. For our secondary schools, these grading practices may present new learning. We recognize the complexity of shifting grading practices and the need for time, support, professional learning, and collaboration. Therefore, our focus for year 1 will be grades 9 through 12. We're approaching implementation in 2 phases, starting this summer with planning and system building. The Grading Steering Committee work team will develop guidance for academic codes for grades 9 through 12. They will create the district implementation plan, set up gradebook systems, design professional learning, and draft the communication plan. Input from stakeholders during this phase is important to ensure the plan is practical and responsive to school needs. We're also encouraging early adopters who may have already begun this work or are eager to get started to also participate. In the fall, 9 through 12 schools will begin using those academic codes supported by ongoing professional learning on the grading principles. Feedback will be important during this time. Starting small enables us to refine practice and address challenges. Additionally, the committee will be planning implementation and professional learning to occur in year 2 for pre-K-8 educators during the 26-27 school year. Thank you. And this time I am going to open it up to questions.
Thank you so much. Dr. Torres Hill, for that presentation. I have a question with regards to this new grading system. Will it have a rubric, or like will the grades be weighted? And how, the other part of the question is with regards to schools that have themes, if you will, how will that impact their way of grading and assessing students?
Great. Thank you for the question. And so some of the committee work that's going to happen this summer is to get into some of the details of the weights and the scales and how those rubrics will look in final form. What we have done in the committee is started to draft, for example, the habits of work, just started to look at other districts and develop sort of a very soft draft of what that could look like, really targeting 3 habits of work. But again, the committee this summer will finalize some of those pieces and start to get to, our schools to understand what it means to separate. We won't necessarily be using the rubric in year 1, just to get we don't want to overwhelm with too many new things, but I think just the use of the codes is a great starting point. And then just introducing and learning about some of those practices will help with the understanding of how we use the rubrics effectively in terms of teasing that out. And in terms of your question regarding themes, again, that I see as we have to take all of that into consideration and the various places, entry points where schools are. And so that again will be a lot of the focus for our district work this summer.
Thank you so much. I have one more question before I pass it on to Board Member Tatum. My question is, with regards to this sample of students that you surveyed, if you will, how did you come to choose these students? Were these students who just random students, or were they students who, high achieving, if you will? Were their transcripts looked at? How did you select them?
Good question. Thank you. So there were students on our advisory committee who were part of that sampling, as well as what we did is we have a contact list, email list of all the students in the district. And so we sent out the survey to the entire list. And so the results that we received were the students who responded to our survey. So it was a random sampling.
And roughly how many students responded?
So we had
out
about,
of the whole, if you will.
Yeah, I would say I would say about 40 or so students, I can get you the exact number, responded to the survey.
Okay, 40 out of how many, roughly?
It was about, I think I have to pull up that slide. I think I had the number in the slide of the exact sampling. Here we go. Okay, here we go. There were 180 respondents. Ms. Barrister Ledger, I'm not sure if you're talking, but you're on mute.
No, I didn't hear. Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. I said 180 respondents, and then I will get you the final number, but about 40 students I would estimate.
Okay, thank you so much. Board Member Tatum, you have the floor.
Thank you, Board Member Darcel Ledger, and Dr. Torres Hill, and to your whole team. I really commend the amount of thought and energy that it takes to weed through these conversations. I have a lot of experience as a teacher myself in these very same conversations. The first school that I taught at was in the process of transitioning their grading practices very much along these lines. And it's a very interesting and difficult thing to do. And I think the direction that you've laid out with the guiding principles and the direction that you're heading in with separating habits of work from academic achievement, those are all things that I think are very important for getting our grading practices to really mean more in our education system than they do currently. And it's like, I think one of the risks in the process is getting into the mechanics of it without, as you mentioned, like the most important part, I forget the name of the researcher who you quoted, really taking the time to get on the same page about what grades are for and really surfacing the multiple ways that teachers, students, families use grades. And so I have a general sort of like advice to like as I look at the plan for this summer's work, you know, developing guidance for the use of these codes and creating an implementation plan for the district. Like really don't lose sight of that, the time that it takes and the diversity of opinions that it takes to develop that kind of consensus on really what this is for. Because everyone's going to want to jump to like, okay, so how do they mean, right? Like, what does this do to my grade book? How is it going to be averaged? What's that final grade going to be? And like the quicker you answer those questions, even though it seems like that would provide some like satisfying certainty, I think could undermine some of the more important cultural change work that this is really about. So just a word of caution to that process. And one question that I have related to that, it feels like this idea of separating out the habits of work from the academic achievement is like a core guiding principle. And I wonder, well, first of all, that's like oftentimes very difficult to do. But secondly, I wonder like, is there a point at which you would imagine that happening in the student's grade itself? Like, is that something that's going to start next year in 9th through 12? That like the grade that shows up next to the kid's name on PowerSchool will be 2 grades, like there will be one for the habits of work and one for the academics, or is that still to be determined? Like there's lots of ways of kind of living in between, but just on that one point, is there clarity on when that separation is likely to happen?
So, you know, first of all, I just want to thank you for the advice, right? Because you want to go slow in this process. So well, you know, taken your point, because that is, this is a shift in practice, right? And we know adaptive work takes time. So thank you for listing that. And, you know, we talked a lot about this, and we know that codes and the idea of the codes, right, really is going to take some time to understand that as well. And it's not that we're not using codes. So I'm going to start there and then I'm going to get to your habits of work question. The codes piece, we know students, teachers are using codes, but it's being used inconsistently, and not all codes, we have full understanding, a shared understanding of what that is. And so exactly what you mentioned earlier was what we need to do right now is a level set and get on the same page and share understanding of the purpose of grading and how we're using the different tools within PowerSchool effectively. And so that piece we knew was going to take some work. And so we wanted to start there. That's not to say that habits of work is not going to be professional, you know, we're not going to provide professional learning and unpack what that means to separate. What does that look like? You look at examples, have teachers engage, but I think the actual technical piece of that in PowerSchool, which is what I think I'm hearing you ask, will likely not happen in the first year as we're still trying to refine and get used to that. But I think, you know, we naturally have to address the principles within our professional learning as a whole. You just kind of can't separate it, but some of these technical pieces may not happen until year 2. So that is one piece where we think can move the actual, what that looks like in PowerSchool in year 2. while we're learning about it in year one.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm trying to think if I have, I mean, I have a million other like technical and process questions,
lot of
but
technical-
they're
oh, yeah.
probably better served for like another space. Uh, so yeah, I would just say that I'd be interested to have this conversation anytime with anyone who's working on it. And
Absolutely.
thank you again for like taking the bull by the horns. It's a shift. It's a shift that I really believe in as an educator, and it will take a lot of commitment from everybody to learn about how to make the shift effectively, communicate about that shift, train up families, train up students. Because I think the last point that I'll make, like students are remarkably adaptive to grading systems. Like the idea that students like really struggle with different grading practices in different classrooms, I'm not so bought in. Like I think students figure it out pretty quick, like what they can do in one classroom and what they can do in another. But oftentimes not to the benefit of their educational experience, right? Like they just kind of like learn how to play the game, whatever the game happens to be. And so it behooves us adults to make the game as meaningful as possible so that students by going through the structures that we've built are really gaining a strong education. And yeah, as you said, the whole foundational assumption of this was that the purpose of grading is to accurately reflect academic achievement. So it all goes back to that. Actually, as I've been ranting, I know that especially in the community, but among teachers as well, there's a lot of attention paid to some of the existing grading policies that I think were meant to kind of begin to shift us in this direction, but without some of the like more thorough transformation of practice. For example, the policy of assigning a student a minimum grade of 50 at the end of the quarter if they did not achieve at least a 50 out of 100. And then, during the pandemic, there was a lot of that policy was sort of extended even further, and there was a lot of attention about like what a zero does in someone's grade and whether that skews the accuracy of academic achievement and things like that. And so some people were, and I believe it was district policy during the pandemic to not assign a grade for any individual assignment lower than a 50. Was this committee addressing any of those specific policies directly, or were you thinking more bigger picture and then we'll come to more
Yes,
that?
it did come up, but I do think this work that we're doing and the next steps that we were outlined will inform policy recommendations, right? That will address that piece.
Okay.
I do think that's forthcoming, but we're not just quite there yet. I think there's some work that needs to be done, as we mentioned, foundationally to shift practice that will get us to then changing board policy.
Cool. I was a little nervous coming into this meeting that we were going to hear about a bunch of like recommendations for policy change that in my mind would have been premature and not do justice to the long-term work that this really requires. And so hearing about the process and the continuation of the process is reassuring to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Board Member Tatum, for all of that. And now we are going to shift to our next agenda item. Thank you again, Dr. Torres-Hill, for that presentation, and thank you to your team as well. Christina, can you please pull up the agenda again? Thank you so much. And our next agenda item is SPED contracts. And we have Jennifer Hoffman who will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair Darasol Ledger. Ms. Santiago, can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Yes, you can.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, can everybody see my screen? Yes, okay, perfect. So tonight's and going to be an overview of special education contract renewals. The objectives for this section include sharing the proposals to continue special education contracts to support students with individualized education plans, and understanding the scope of services offered by 8 contractors. 7 are a continuation. There is one new contract being proposed. First, I just wanted to share with the board steps that we've taken for recruitment and hiring of our own staff. OTM has been instrumental in this work, including local outreach, growing our own and national outreach. There's been a lot attempted over the last few years in terms of hiring our own staff. We want to just be able to highlight that. And then additionally, you are aware, but just a reminder that there have been some changes with our new contracts and as well as MOUs and incentives for both paraeducators and for teachers. And while most of the contracts are for other services, including BCBAs, RBTs, and speech and language clinicians, it is important to highlight the steps we've taken to ensure we recruit and maintain paraeducators and special education teachers for the district. As a reminder for our service delivery models, it is important to remember that we do have a continuum, and while the contracts serve both, I'm going to say ends of our continuum, one end being our push-in model and most inclusive, which it really encompasses our speech and language clinicians. There is a need for additional supports in other areas of the continuum, more resource spaces, in district programming, where we see some of the BCBA and RBT supports supporting our students with higher needs. So the first contract that is up for continuation is with Stepping Stone. This contract is for speech and language clinicians as well as paraeducators. While the contract is around $4 million, it is important to note that this contract is funded through budgeted existing vacancies, and the funding is only used if we actually have a candidate that is hired through the agency. So there's no direct impact to the district. We're looking to hire 21 speech and language clinicians, 2 which would support our extended school year or ESY programming in the summer, as well as 50 paraeducators. Another speech and language contract is Soliant. This is again a continuation of an existing contract. Again, this is a flat fee funded by existing vacancies, and we're continuing with the amount of $500,000. Another speech and language contract is through AMN Healthcare. The amount we're looking for is $660,450. Again, a continuation. The reason for, and there's one more, let me just address that one. So CBS Therapy also has speech and language clinicians. The reason for the 4 speech and language contracts is simply because there are not enough speech and language clinicians that we can find either through our own hiring or through contracted services to meet the needs of the district, the students in the district that have speech and language services on their IEPs. So again, this would be a continuation. And then the new contract for speech and language is King's Speech. This is a new contract that we're looking to engage in. Again, just totaling not to exceed $500,000. The draw to King's Speech is that, number one, they are based in West Hartford, and they are also sharing with us that they primarily hire in-person speech and language clinicians, which is different from the other 3. While that is a draw, we do hope that that would pan out and that it wouldn't be defer to virtual if they can't hire in person. And then the next three are they're all continuations. They're contracts that are specifically for BCBAs, which is Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and for RBTs, which is a Registered Behavior Tech. Connecticut Behavioral Health is an existing contract that we have used. Again, this contract is funded through our IDEA grant, so no, it's not a cost to the district. This contract supports primarily our early elementary programs where we have resource spaces designed around the philosophy of ABA services. We do have discrete trials that are implemented in those programs for students with autism. So this is, again, a longstanding contract that we've had and has been very successful. Our next contract is Creative Interventions. Again, BCBA and RBT support, funded through our IDEA grant. Same idea. This and the next contract really work with, I mean, and we again spread out the contracts over three because there is a definite area of need for BCBAs. I think I've explained that the availability of BCBAs as well as the programming that they have to go through to be certified is extensive, and so we generally cannot find them. So we continue this contract. And then the last contract is with A Brand New Day. Again, our BCBAs and RBTs, funded through our IDEA grant. And I think I mentioned, again, the broad scope of the work not only happens with our students, but it also is collaboration with our teams, collaboration with our building leaders. There is PPT support that occurs. There are evaluations that occur. So it's a broad scope of services, but ideally we're looking at our lower elementary and supporting our students with autism. So that is a high-level overview of the contracts that we are moving forward for next year. I will say that, well, many on this call, but also just the work that we've engaged in over the school year with our task force and the legislative session, the contracts do support a lot of the conversation we've had with that bill and where special education is, definitely heading with the state. So we continue to find ways to hire our own. We just, continue to have difficulty around that speech and language piece. And then again, with BCB and RBT support, where we know that our lower elementary, we're seeing a high number of students coming into the district with specific needs and want to be able to support them. So I can open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hoffman, for your presentation. I have a question. I do have a question with regards to perhaps, with the growing your own and hiring from within. I know that Hartford Public Schools has had opportunities for staff members, teachers to add certifications such as TESOL training. Is that something that you have explored or are thinking of exploring with regards to the speech language certification? Because if so, that would, you would require, or the teacher, whoever takes the training would require a commitment to the district. So that would, I would say, solve part of the problem for, say, 2 or 3 years. But have you explored that at all? And have you explored the cost of that?
I think the difficulty with speech and language is that it requires a highly specialized program. So I believe right now there are 2 colleges in the state that have speech and language clinician programs that are also downstate, which makes it difficult for us. So it's a little bit different where I know that either the alternative route to certification or even Relay is local and is more accessible to either people that are in our district as maybe a paraeducator or somebody that's, you know, coming to the city. I think I would love to explore it. Yes, absolutely. I think the speech and language program that is available for people is a master's level program. It's a little bit different. So it's not something that I could actually replicate in the district. I think I'd have to be able to work with another university to maybe have a pipeline. And it's a longer program. So there are a few things that we would have to consider, but yes, at the end of the day, absolutely. I know that OTM has definitely partnered with other universities on the special education side, in terms of discounted tuition rates, partnerships, and incentives. But I think that speech and language piece is a little bit different, but it's something we can certainly explore.
Thank you so much. And one more question with regards to the contracts that you are seeking, contract continuation that you're seeking. What is the, are you able, well, I'll say it this way, are you able to fill those positions with these different companies, or do you still have a hard time filling them?
The BCBAs and the RBTs we're able to fill. We have supports for all of our, we call them transition learning resource rooms. We've been able to staff those spaces and support the schools and the students. The speech and language continues to be an area of difficulty. That's why we added that other contract. Again, it really is a matter of, it's like a little bit of trial and error. We're trying to find contracts that have in-person speech. We've heard loud and clear from our principals and from our families that virtual is very difficult for students, and we agree with that. So the contract that we're looking to include has indicated that they're able to find in-person clinicians. I know that's been a question as to why do people always go to either agencies and not, rather be hired by districts. I don't have a clear answer on that, but if I can partner with an agency that has in person, I'm willing to move in that direction so that we are better prepared to meet the needs of our students.
Thank you so much. And now I will pass it on to Board Member Tatum. You have a question?
Thank you. I do. More curiosity about the funding sources for, I guess, in particular, the speech and language. You said that we're able to fund those through the savings that exists because of vacant positions. And I guess it's more of like a budget process question. Like, I know that in the budget process, we build in a vacancy assumption. Which wouldn't, like, I guess my question is, does the money that exists that can pay for these contracts is there because there are vacancies beyond even what was assumed in the budgeting process for last year? Which is why there's the money available. Is that accurate, or?
We project, so we start in probably January projecting out for the following school year. So we know the number of students that we'll have in for the following year. That's how our positions are allocated. So we have a general idea. I think if the question is around exceeding that contract, no, we don't exceed the contract. We work with that agency to give us a ballpark on what it would cost for a number. So even though we're going up to maybe 50 speech and language clinicians, I wouldn't hire 50 clinicians from that agency. It's giving us space that if we have if I have to go through that contract and I don't get anybody in the other 3, then I have some space available there. But the vacancy, we have not run into an issue where we're exceeding contracts based on the vacancy of funding that has been allocated.
Okay, so like, and I'm asking like partly with an eye toward next year, where I know in the budget process through the like mitigation work, we in order to realize some more savings, we increased our vacancy assumption. And I'm just kind of trying to compare or be able to compare or track, if in a year's time that revised vacancy assumption means there's less money available to fill holes like this. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how the mechanic of that vacancy assumption works in the budget process, which
Yep.
I get is not necessarily your area of expertise, but your answer was helpful.
I can add that it's based on student needs. So we also know the number of students with an IEP with speech and language services listed. So we can also gauge what a caseload would look like in a certain school. We also know our schools, so we would know that, while not ideal, maybe a high school case manager can take a few more students on a caseload rather than our elementary caseloads. But it is, my team has a really good handle on the actual numbers of students that are in need of services. And while it can fluctuate, I think we have a really good number. The number of our enrollment changes as well, but we have a fairly clear idea.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Thank you so, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm looking to see if we have any other board members who have questions. I don't see any hands. Board Member Tatum, do you want to ask another question? Or have a thought?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, great. All right, thank you so much. And once again, thank you, Ms. Hoffman. And I believe that concludes our meeting. Thank you for attending and